today we want to slow things right down. We're going to talk through some of the common stories and opinions that get pushed on to first home buyers, how to handle other people's opinions and fear of missing out, and most importantly, some practical ways to step back, get clear, and make decisions that actually support your goals and your vision. Hello, and welcome to First Home Unlocked, the podcast for unlocking clarity and confidence for first home buyers. I'm Jack Elliott, National First Home Buyer Specialist at Alcove.
And I'm Chris Bates, ex-financial planner and mortgage broker.
Together, we are on a mission to empower you with the keys to unlock your first home. Let's jump in. Hello, and welcome back to First Home Unlocked. How are you today, Chris?
Doing well, Jack. It's been a big week in our household. My daughter started school this week, and my boy starts school next week. And yeah, she's handled it really well, but she's probably one of the oldest ones in the class. So she's 6 next month. But yeah, it's been a big week in our household. Where have you been?
I had my birthday on the weekend, so that was nice. Me and Amy went down to the beach, which was good. And how are you feeling, Chris, with the kids going to school? How did that go?
I do love my kids. I know every parent would say that, but it is one of those moments where they're growing up. And yeah, this sort of next 5 years for us is something what obviously I'm not the only person involved, but I call it sort of the golden years. And, when they start getting to like 10 or 11, they say, Dad, you're not cool anymore. I want to start hanging out with my friends. And so, yeah, it does feel like the clock's ticking for us. And, as a family, we're just going to really try to focus on making the most of this next 5 years.
Yeah, nice. So look, today we're going to be getting into something that comes up in almost every single conversation we have with first home buyers. And that's how to navigate the pressure that comes with buying your first home. So you've got pressure from family, friends, media headlines, and sometimes even pressure from yourself through comparison and fear of missing out. And what we see is first home buyers feeling rushed into decisions or second guessing themselves because of all the external noise and conflicting opinions. So today we want to slow things right down. We're going to talk through some of the common stories and opinions that get pushed on to first home buyers, how to handle other people's opinions and fear of missing out, and most importantly, some practical ways to step back, get clear, and make decisions that actually support your goals and your vision. All right, so let's start by talking about the pressure first home buyers are actually under. And a lot of that pressure comes from people who genuinely care about you, from parents to friends to colleagues, and there's even pressure from media headlines. You'll hear things like, you need to get into the property market or you'll miss out. Rent money is dead money. Just buy something, or we bought 30 years ago and it worked out for us, so you'll be fine. And it usually does come from a good place. But the problem is, a lot of people have very confident opinions about property without actually being across today's market conditions, today's lending rules, or your goals, income, and your timeline. So Chris, how can first home buyers navigate the pressure of other people's opinions and all the conflicting advice out there?
Yeah, it's such a big topic, this one, Jack. I'm so glad you've sort of, decided to make this an episode, because I think it's one of the things that's often not spoke about is the, the pressure that is put on them. There's already anxiety in society around rental, and they're starting a lot of first home buyers a lot later than where they want to be. And, a lot of parents are wanting them to get security and stability and get them to buy something. And, and they do, are pretty good at giving them advice. And, there's sometimes friends that are doing X, Y, Z, and, they want other people to believe what they're doing is the best thing. They share it. And so there's just so much pressure, and the media and the property obsession in Australia. And, as our role in this situation is really to be a calming influence, right? And just to sort of really get them to understand that, yeah, I get all that, but like, you've got to think about yourself and your family and your plan, and making sure that this is actually going to work for you. I can give them countless examples. I've seen it time and time again where first time buyers have bought something, but is it actually working for them? Probably not. So on one metric, they could say they're a success in their mind, but has that decision really worked for them? Is it actually been a good financial decision, but has it created stress or problems in the relationship, or is it actually going to help them with their next move? And obviously, there's times when markets are moving fast as well, and sometimes you do need to sort of, okay, we're doing this, we've got to get on with it, because there is an opportunity cost. But often there's times when, like, you do need to just take a step back and slow it down. And so, but But I do think that comparison sort of thing is real. It's just natural in society. It's not good in any way. But I think you got to just really focus on your own plan, your own goal. And it's not a race. Life's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And you just got to make sure this decision actually works for you, and educate yourself up front.
I think you're right, Chris. And you mentioned all them things to consider. And I think sometimes it can feel really overwhelming when people are telling you what you should do. And one thing that can help is preparing yourself with some simple phrases so you don't feel like you're put on the spot. So something like, that's interesting, I'll look into that, or I'll talk about that with my broker, can really help create a bit of space for you. And then you can go away, think about it properly, and explore it in a much lower pressure environment. Because the reality is there are conflicting views out there, not just from family and friends, but even from industry professionals. So that's why it's so important to educate yourself, like you mentioned, Chris, and work with someone you trust and resonate with. And as a mortgage broker working with first home buyers every day, that's something I'm really conscious of, because our role isn't just about telling you what to do, but about being more a sounding board, talking through different scenarios and helping you work out what actually makes sense for you and your situation. So a really common message that first home buyers hear is you just need to get in, or you just need to buy something. You can always upgrade later. But the problem is just getting in without thinking about what you're buying can create bigger issues later on. So Chris, you work with buyers in the property market every single day. What's your take on the idea that you just need to get in, or you just need to buy something?
I've just seen it just not work so many times, and I get it. I totally, a big thing I want people to listen to here is not just myself, but also Jack and the broader team is, we're totally empathetic, and we totally get that everyone's on their own journey, the anxieties in the market, the fear, the misknowledge, and how stressful it is. We all can reflect on our own journeys, watching our clients. And I think, even just talking, off, outside of work, and just listening to friends and, and how they feel around property decisions. Often the whole, you just got to get in is, a lot of people have prioritized the right things in life, I feel. They've focused on their personal growth, their human capital. They've gone and explored and experiences around the world. And that's often what I think is a really good move in someone's 20s, right? Is just to, get that sort of comfort. And what they've often neglected in that situation, and that's might be just because they've spent their money on things and they haven't saved, or they just haven't really built that habit, is they just feel like they're rushed. They feel like they're trying to catch up. And so this feeling of I've just got to get in is just trying to, I guess, offset this feeling like I need to catch up. And so a lot of it's their own pressure. And then they just rush it. They get a bit trigger happy. They rush the decision. They just get a property. The old properties go up. I just need to get something. You can't go wrong. All these sort of myths around property are playing. And often because they've rushed that decision, because you don't get a second chance at it, they come back a few years later and go, oh, I probably shouldn't have gone and bought that sort of cheaper investment property where I don't even know, and probably should have done more research with who I engaged there and slowed down. Or maybe I shouldn't have just gone and bought that high density apartment or a studio, or it's got no parking. Because I just rushed it. And so I think that's where it flips the wrong way, is that you rush the decision. Yeah, you still get a loan. Yeah, you still get a property, but you don't get a quality asset.
Yeah, and I think the key word there, Chris, is that rushing, that just get in mindset. It's pushing people towards buying as cheaply as possible to tick that box, like you said, and they just want to feel like they've entered the market. But the risk with that approach, like you were talking about, is it can lead to them rushed decisions that aren't really aligned with your longer term goals and your future as well. So this is where asset quality matters so much, because your first purchase often sets up your entire property journey. And it affects whether you can upgrade later, turn the property into an investment, or use equity to build wealth over time. Now, if you do buy a poor quality asset, your property has less growth potential, which means equity builds more slowly and you have less options for your next move. So that's why we encourage first home buyers to shift the mindset from buy as cheap as possible or just get in, to buy the best quality asset you can based on your situation and what feels comfortable in your budget. Because a high quality asset is more likely to support them future steps, because it gives you a better chance of growth and flexibility. And that is where coming back to the asset quality principles we covered in episode 6 really helps. And also using our asset quality checklist can help you pressure test a property and focus on buying the strongest asset you can. And we'll link both of those in the show notes for you as well. Now, Chris, when you look back at buyers you've worked with, what's the difference you see over time between people who focused on just getting in versus those who prioritized asset quality and maybe slowed things down a bit?
The key thing is that markets always are shifting. The best strategy is different for every client. And I guess it's just really trying to help clients make the right decision. And when we do have that opportunity, because sometimes we don't, clients come to us after they've purchased their first place. So we can reflect on clients that we didn't have the time to help them, but we saw that when they, the pain that they had when they did rush it, we saw huge issues with clients buying into the apartment markets in, Brisbane and Melbourne. I've seen heaps of issues with clients, buying investment properties regionally, all over the place, and having 3 or 4 properties and they're not actually working. We're seeing heaps of clients rush it with, and then getting, relationships and break down, and then they have to sort of sell the property. And so I do think that we've seen that, but the clients that sort of we guide that, and we do slow them down. If I go back in time, often we're trying to help them think through not just what's going to suit them today, what's going to suit them in the future. The amount of clients that we used to use the 6-year rule a lot, which was, back in the day where clients would buy their future home, they would live in it for 6-12 months, and then they would rent out where they want to live today. And so it was a lot easier to do that back then. Let's say 5-10 years ago, prices were a lot cheaper and borrowing capacity. Sometimes that's a challenging strategy in 2025, just because the costs to buy the future home or somewhere they really want to live is out of reach anyway. And often we're saying, well, can we get something that's going to give you a decent runway today, something that you can live in today, that rather than a really longer term home? And so I think it really comes down to that, is that, and the challenge when you get the first thing wrong is, you're right, Jack. It's, what builds wealth isn't paying off mortgages. What builds wealth is getting assets that go up in value. And saving money is hard, and saving and paying properties off, builds money, but you could save money in the bank or put that into shares, and arguably that would, wouldn't be far off. It's what makes the difference is when that property goes up in value. And in today's world, you might not need to pay LMI, huge benefit. You might not need to pay stamp duty, huge benefit. You might not need to save 20% deposit, huge benefit. But back in the day, you could burn a lot of costs entering as a first home buyer and then exiting a few years later. And that's been minimized today with obviously, loans and, stamp duty savings, etc. But that's where they used to get burnt a lot. They would buy, burn all these costs, end up getting an asset that doesn't go in value, then they have to pay seller costs, and they get stuck and they've just lost the opportunity. And, the one that did make a better decision maybe bought their future home, or maybe bought an asset and it's gone up dramatically, and they've really then able to make their next decision after that and upgrade. And that first one is so key because, if that does well, it creates this whole level of opportunity down the line that you can't even envisage when you first purchase.
Yeah, and like you said, Chris, that focus on asset quality and buying a property that is likely to grow in value for you is the most important thing. Yes, it's important to set up the loan the right way. It's important to see what options you have, but it really comes down to that property that you choose as your first one can really make or break it when it comes to that second move if you're looking to upgrade, invest in the future. So that's why we focus on asset quality so much, because it's so important, and sometimes it gets overlooked with the first home buyer space as well. Now, I think this leads us to where a lot of pressure turns inward, which is the fear of missing out. Now, when that fear kicks in, people can make decisions they probably wouldn't make if they had more time and space to think. So if you are feeling that rush, one of the most helpful things you can do is slow it down by talking it through with someone who isn't emotionally tied to that decision, like your broker or trusted professional who can act as a sounding board. Now, the goal here isn't to rush into the market. It's to buy the right property at the right time for you and your future life. Now, I do want to acknowledge, though, there's been a lot of noise out there, especially in the media, about property prices rising and people being locked out if they don't act right now. And hearing that over and over again can feel really overwhelming as a first home buyer. Now, Chris, a lot of buyers hear that prices are growing faster than wages and start to feel like they're falling behind. How can we help people respond to that kind of pressure?
Yeah, I think there's this, I'm a massive believer in behavioral finance. Behavioral economics is sort of another name for it. And if you've never heard about those, it's all these unconscious sort of biases that we've got. And I think FOMO is absolutely, the scarcity urgency is a huge motivator, and and these things drive us way more than our sort of rational sort of side of our brain. And when you first look at this stuff, you're like, oh yeah, that's a bit, woo woo. But the more that you understand this, particularly in the property market around financial decisions, it's how your sort of unconscious bias sort of drives you. And this is real, right? So the clients they've already got this sunk cost bias. I should have bought earlier. And they enter the market, they're pre-approved, they're excited. And then they chase a rabbit, then that one runs away, the one that got away. And then they come back a week or two later. And because the market's moving, they go, hang on a sec, I could have bought that last week for 700. Now I'm looking at this property, it's not as good, and it's 700. And they rush and they just jump. It's called property agents love this type of buyer because it's what is called a wounded bull in their mind. And that's how that terminology they say. And you're more likely to be trigger happy and overpay for that second property. I think when you're right, Jack, that the key here is once you've got your knowledge, it's trying to not be stuck in this echo chamber of confirmation bias and I'm just going to, rush and make this decision. You sort of got to be like, I'm feeling pain because I missed out on that one. And my learning from that is maybe I should have gone harder on that because it was a great property. And maybe I should have done a bit more research around what it was going to sell for. And I won't make that mistake again because I'm going to really go harder when I get the right property. It's not to go harder at a poorer asset. And so I think it's just really, and when we talk to clients around properties, because we're not emotionally attached to what they buy, and great brokers are abundance mindset. They're not like just trying to get you to buy so they can go and get more loans like that. If you ever got professionals in your life that are not trying to give you good advice, that's just keep walking. But what we focus on is the negatives of properties, not the positives. We can point those out. Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good. But if we can find some major negatives, that's the thing that you've got to always be looking at, because as a buyer, you're always looking at the positives. What you want to do is focus on the negatives. Like, what is really the things that are quite not good about this property? And I absolutely go look for those and try to raise those with clients, because if they haven't factored those in, that's the things that have got to maybe cool their jets. And they go, well, maybe I shouldn't go that hard on this one because it's got no parking and it's really dark and it's got massive privacy problems. I just need to be a bit more patient.
And I think you're right, Chris, with looking at properties, trying to slow it down as much as you can and consider all different options, as well as if you're feeling like that your wages aren't growing as fast as prices are growing. That's a real concern out there for first home buyers. But a big part of everything we're talking about is what you can control. So coming back to what you actually can control and building a plan around that. So one of the most useful tools we use with first home buyers is getting clear on your goals and vision and doing a future self-test. Now, what this means, and we've mentioned it throughout this episode, but it's not buying for where you are today, but buying for where you want to be in 5 to 10 years. So thinking ahead to things like family goals, career changes, and lifestyle shifts. So we've linked a previous episode on this and our goals and visions checklist in the show notes. What it does is it walks you through the kind of questions worth asking before you're looking at buying. And you can do it on your own or together if you're buying with your partner. And once you're clear on your vision, you'll feel much more confident as a first home buyer. Now, this is really matters because there's a big cost to buying twice. Outgrowing a home too quickly and having to sell and buy again can add up really quickly. You might be looking at 2 sets of stamp duty depending on your situation, your selling costs, agent fees, buying costs, moving costs, plus a lot more stress and disruption in your life as well. So sometimes waiting longer and buying once is financially and emotionally smarter than rushing into a stepping stone property you outgrow too quickly. Now, Chris, are there any tips or anything else you wanted to add here?
I think it's really hard to imagine what other buyers want, because and that's one of the, the myths that I really get frustrated on is that I like it several, like, no, we all like different things. Look at how we all different dress, the cars we drive. If we all like the same things, we'd all just be, carbon copy of each other. And I think that's one of the biggest things you've got to do is you've got to flip out of what you like and start to think, well, what is mass market that people are going to like? You might absolutely love the pink kitchen, but does the whole market like it? Probably in this year, but maybe not 5 years ago. So I think you've got to really think about that. Like, does a single want it? Does a couple want it? Does a single child family want it? Would a two family. Now they wouldn't live here. It's too tight, like would a downsizer like it or a single child family like it? And start to think about all the different sort of buyers you might like this property on top of what suits you. And if you find that, there's a big pool of people that would really suit this property, that's a really big tick. Because that means your situation, let's say you're a couple and you're thinking about having kids, you don't really know what you're going to want till you have kids. Like I laugh at myself and, it's just, you don't know a lot of things about the world till you have kids. But I think trying to think about that's a really good one if you're planning, but also trying to expand it and start to think about, okay, yeah, this could suit a lot of people. It doesn't just suit a single sort of, worker. It does suit a big, broad pool.
Yeah, and like we've mentioned in previous episodes, when you have a large buyer pool, that time when you come to sell that property and upgrade, for example, the more people competing to buy your home, the bigger that price will be when you do sell. So that's why we're talking about kind of thinking about, yes, what suits you today for that property. Obviously, you're going to live in it and feel it every single day. So you want to buy a property that suits your needs now, but then also a large pool of buyers. So one day when you do sell, you're more likely to have a higher selling price and then be able to leverage that into the next property or your next move as well. All right, so let's jump into the rent money's dead money story. Chris, for someone who's consistently being told that renting is a waste of money, what advice would you give them?
It's a good one. Interest is dead money too. Like it's, if the property value doesn't go up, whether you spend money on rent and it goes to the owner of that property, or whether you pay interest, the benefit of renting over owning is there's all these other costs of owning. You've got to pay, let's say an apartment, it's $500 a week to rent, 25 grand a year, let's just call it. And you buy that same apartment for 700,000 and you have to pay interest on a loan of 650,000 or something, right? At 5% interest rates, we're probably at 35,000, ish, plus the strata, plus any other costs, maintenance, etc. You might be at $45,000 a year. So, there's $45,000 of cost to own this versus $25,000 to rent it. So is that really dead money? Well, what's more dead money? The 4550 is actually more dead money because that money's gone versus the 25,000 to rent. And I think that's one of the things you've got to think about is that interest is dead money. Now, the benefit of the person owning it is obviously there's capital growth value here, but only if they buy a good asset. And so that's the way to think about it, I would say, is that rent is dead money. Yeah, okay, you don't get that money back. Yeah, that's right. But you get a lifestyle benefit of living in there. And, paying $500 a week, or if you're paying $1,500 a week to live in the two-bed apartment with views and, okay, maybe there's a bit of dead money there because you probably could have been, live just as good a life. That extra $1,000 a week isn't giving you $1,000 a week of lifestyle benefit. That absolutely a bit of rent is dead money when you're sort of living beyond your means and you're renting something really expensive. But when you're comparing just obviously what you can afford to buy, what you can and something that's affordable to rent, you really got to weigh that up. There's times when rent's really cheap and rents have gone up a lot in recent years, which making people feel like it's a lot more dead money, but so have interest rates. And so the cost to own's gone up a lot. When interest rates were 2% and rents were cheaper, then it's a bit different. So hopefully that just reframes your thinking because you don't get interest back, you don't get strata, you don't get maintenance. Maybe if it adds value, you do. And it only matters when you sell.
Yeah, and like you said, Chris, you have to consider that purchasing a property, it's a huge commitment. All them things that you've listed as well, you're not just paying back what you borrowed, but also that significant amount of interest. So I think instead of framing this as rent versus mortgage, a better question to ask yourself is, does buying right now actually suit me financially and from a lifestyle point of view as well? So, Chris, are there any other common stories or pressures that you see first home buyers having to deal with before we wrap up today's episode?
I do think the media and the colleagues and the family, I think some of the pressures from brothers and sisters is often some of the biggest. Obviously, a lot of people say parents, but parents often with their kids, there's some definitely that are really trying to plan their life out and make sure they follow their vision of success. But then there's also a lot of parents who learn that they will let their kids sort of learn their own lessons. And I do think sometimes the pressure of brothers and sisters can motivate you a lot more than it probably should. and your closest friends, because you're in your little small network, two of your friends have purchased and you just want to feel like you're equal. So just be conscious of that. There's nothing wrong with that, but just being really aware that, okay, I feel like I really want to make this happen. And just because of that's motivating me, and just being real with it. But I don't want to make a decision here. I'm going to prioritize. I'm going to make it happen, but I'm going to make sure it's the right decision. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think from what you just spoke about, Chris, this whole episode, to wrap it up in one word, it's about awareness, right? We've talked about a lot of pressures that you can face as a first home buyer, and it's just coming back to being aware that they're there and coming back to your goal. And just remember, you don't have to figure it out all alone. We're mortgage brokers and we work with first home buyers every day. So you can book a get to know you chat with us using a link in the show notes, and we can help you step back, talk through all your options and work out a plan that makes sense for you and your situation. So thank you so much for listening. We'll see you soon. And thank you again, Chris, for joining me.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for listening. We'd really appreciate if you could do us a huge favor. Share this episode with any first home buyers that you know, so we can help more people like you feel clear, calm and confident when purchasing their first property. You can join our Facebook group, First Home Unlocked, to continue the conversation with other first home buyers. Or if you're ready to unlock your first home, you can book a get to know you chat by using the link in the show notes or by going to firsthomeunlocked.com.au. Before we go, just a reminder that everything we share on this podcast is general in nature and not tailored to your personal situation. We always recommend seeking advice from a qualified and experienced professional when making financial decisions.